How's everyone doing? I'm here with Yankee Yes Network studio host. He hosts the Yankees, Nets, and calls Liberty games. Chris Shearn. Chris, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Dan. How are you, buddy? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing very well. We're here to talk some Yankees season starting. I don't know if you've seen, obviously a huge Yankee fan. The room obviously probably gives it away, but I have my first question is
hmm
who do you think should be the opening day shortstop for the New York Yankees?
All right. Well, Anthony Volpe is doing a great job so far in spring training. However, this is his first camp. He's 21 years of age. He'll turn 22 April 28th, I believe. Um, has a home run down there already, playing well defensively. He's not on the 40-man roster, though. So it would take a not only Herculean effort to continue for Volpe, for all those fans who want to see the youth come up like him and Dominguez, just so I could compartmentalize that for a second. Um, I just don't see it happening because he's not on the 40 man. And I don't think he sees it happening either. Meredith Marakovitz, who works for Yes, and she's down there spring training in Tampa, she asked him if he feels pressure about being the top Yankee prospect. Not at all. Brian Hoke, who works for MLB.com, he was on my podcast with me on the S Network. And he basically said he sees a lot of Jeter in him. And that's not, Hall of Fame Derek Jeter. It's just Derek Jeter early on in his career, how he carries himself and in that aspect. Volpe is something to be excited for in the future. Does he maybe get a call up later this year after starting down in AAA? I think so, because he only had 89 at bats down in Scranton last year in 22 games. It's not a lot of exposure at the AAA level. So if I had to be a betting man right now, Volpe is in AAA if there's no injuries or nothing else, because I need to remind Yankee fans back in 1996, Tony Fernandez got hurt and Derek Jeter stepped in on opening day. It's the home run off El Presidente, Dennis Martinez, and now he's in the Hall of Fame. So anything could happen. But conventional wisdom tells me Volpe's going to start in AAA. So having said that, I think Isaiah Kiner-Falefa starts the season on the bench, and I think Oswald Peraza is your opening day shortstop. I think he showed flashes of greatness, not only in the field, but at the plate last year. And I think that starts the season for the Yankees. I think IKF is your utility guy coming off the bench. And I think Peraza is your shortstop.
Well, I think the biggest thing with Volpe and Peraza, I think Volpe is a really good player. The only way I would see him cracking the 40 man in the opening day roster is if Isaiah Kiner-Falefa gets traded before the end of spring training, which there is some possibility to it, but I
Could happen. The Dodgers need a shortstop. And I saw that thrown out there on Twitter that maybe the Yankees trade him out there to LA. So you're right. Things could happen. Gleyber Torres, his name was being dangled at the trading deadline last year. It was rumored or reported by the Miami Herald that there was a deal in place for Nicky Lopez for Gleyber Torres. So who knows what happens? Because if Gleyber is shipped off, DJ LeMahieu, the Yankees see him as first, second, and third. And he's that Swiss Army knife in the infield. So who knows what happens? You're absolutely right. But like we said, it's going to take those machinations in order for Volpe to get that call up when the Yankees break camp and go to the Bronx for that opening series against the Giants.
and the last thing I'd want to put about the Yankee shortstop situation and why, if you're a fan that thinking Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is going to be their starting shortstop, if they weren't willing to play him in the biggest moments of the season last
Right,
year, why would they go back to him to
right.
start this year?
I think his role when they brought him back, if he does indeed stay with the team moving forward, I really think they saw him as their utility infielder. That's what I think because I think they knew they needed to move forward. And to your point, it's because in the playoffs, you have Oswald Peraza getting a huge playoff start at shortstop. Remember, the Yankees were kind of juggling the shortstop role, and they didn't have a closer either. They didn't have a closer on paper. So it's going to be interesting to see moving forward how IKF's handled, how shortstop evolves throughout the season. I really want to see at some point, I would love it. I would love for Volpe and Jason Dominguez to both start at the AAA level, and I want to see them thrive. And I want to actually go to Scranton and see that happen. That's a great ballpark, by the way. If you've never been, you should get out there. It's a ride, but it's well worth the ride. But I'd love to see both of those guys at some point this season come up and get a little cup of coffee, like just a sign of the future things to come. Because Dominguez, I'll tell you, I saw him in person at Single A Hudson Valley. Now I know it's just high A ball, but the speed was the first thing I noticed. And he, in his first game this year, before he absolutely demolished a home run against the Phillies, he almost beat out a ground ball on the infield. He adds that stolen base category to the lineup. So does Volpe. We saw him in his first game. He gets on base, he steals second, he steals third. That's something that this Yankee team hasn't really had in a very long time. Threat on the basis. And we know with the disengagement rules with the pitchers now, Dan, I mean,
You need it more than ever.
Yeah, that's going to toy with pitchers on the mound. So it's going to be interesting to see moving forward how they're handled. But I think I would hope they both start at the AAA level and they both get cups of coffee this season.
I think Volpe's closer to the major leagues than Dominguez.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
I could see Volpe getting called up maybe at the earliest of June or late May, because if he continues to set it up and light the world on fire this spring training, I think there's going to be more pressure put on the front office to get him up, especially if he starts off and hot at AAA.
Well, it's only to the Yankees' benefit if that happens, because we're talking about trades. If you know you have that down at the AAA level and he's your top prospect, we've been hearing about Anthony Volpe now, a Jersey kid, for how long? We're both Jersey guys too.
Yeah.
So we love the prospect of a Jersey guy being the top prospect with the Yankees. But I think it's just to the Yankees' benefit that if he keeps playing the way he's playing at spring training and he starts at AAA and he keeps putting up these numbers, then the Yankees don't have a problem. They have a solution. They could spin pieces for pitching if they need it. We just saw Tommy Kahnle the other day. He has a biceps problem. He said it's going to take a month for him to get better. All right, they need bullpen help. They could get it from within. But if this keeps progressing and maybe Kahnle has issues throughout the season, hey, we got Volpe down there. Let's bring him up. He could play second. He could play short, although I'd rather him play short and not second. But there's so many possibilities. There's so many layers to the onion when you have prospects who are as good as Peraza and Volpe.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And now we haven't addressed the other two, I'd say, pretty big question marks.
Left field?
Left field. That, I guess we'll start there.
Yeah.
Aaron Hicks is having a good spring,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know how much of that is smoke and mirrors, because Aaron Hicks really since 2019 hasn't been the player he was before he was given that extension.
Right.
And
let's start here, Dan. Let's start here. A big thing with Hicks is health, because we all know what he can do when he is healthy. And he just told our Meredith Marakovitz last week, a big part of his problem was that he wasn't able to catch up to a high fastball. And we saw that time and time again last year. He hit 216 with 8 homers and 40 RBI in 130 games. This is something, there's nowhere to go but up from those numbers.
That's true.
Season. Let's be honest. Now, he was also very honest in that interview. Meredith asked him a great question. It was kind of like, how do you, because we all know about spring training numbers. It's fool's gold, because you could see a guy struggle in spring training and then the first month of the season hit 10 home runs and bat 320 and everything is hunky-dory. But Hicks, it's that mental game. If I don't have good spring numbers, how am I going to enter the regular season and have the mental capacity to get off on the right foot in the regular season? And when you come off a season like he had last year, you have to put it out there in the spring that, all right, I made improvements. Here are my numbers in the spring, and these are not going to get lost in translation when late March rolls around. However, there's one or two ways you could react when you get to camp and your manager basically says left field is an open competition. And Hicks said, that got my competitive juices flowing. And it should. No one should want to lose their job. So he's saying all the right things, Dan. He's doing all the right things so far down there. He did misplay a fly ball, but it's spring training. Everybody, Yankee Twitter is undefeated. You can't make a single solitary mistake ever. Yeah. It's baby steps. It's a 162 game season. And if you get a healthy Aaron Hicks, and I know Yankee fans will say, well, we haven't seen that. In about 3 years, we haven't seen that. So when are we going to see it? This is on him. He knows that. He absolutely 1,000% knows that. But you now have a guy in Oswaldo Cabrera who got the extended cup of coffee last season, played in the playoffs, brought that youthful exuberance to the team, was playing left field, was playing right field, was doing all the right things, saying all the right things. Just, he looks like he's about 13 years old. And
he does.
He just brought that, it's like you and I, when we ran out to play Little League Baseball, that's what you get from this guy. So you've got Bader, you've got Stanton, you've got Judge. There's your outfield right there. And Aaron Judge is actually getting some time in left field
today.
Yes, to have Giancarlo Stanton play right. And the athlete that Aaron Judge is, we saw him in center. It's just that every Yankee fan on the planet has to hold their breath and like walk very lightly over eggshells when he's out there, because he's tracking down whatever he can get to. Because you heard Aaron Boone last year. Somebody asked him, does Aaron like playing center field? And he basically said he would play there every day if I allowed him to. So you have athletes out there. Bader is your center fielder, hands down.
He's elite defensively.
Yes.
That's why they traded for him.
And what fans don't understand, I said this in my first episode of my podcast on Yes. The lineup, when healthy, is going to mash every single game. And of course, here comes Yankees Twitter. It's the same lineup as last year. False. Everybody's healthy. Knock on wood. Coming into the first series of the season against the Giants. Bader could lead off. Bader could hit fifth. Bader's another guy like LeMahieu. He's like, you could insert him at different points of the lineup and he'll still be extremely potent. You have Judge, you have Stanton, you have LeMahieu. Donaldson's another position. I know we're probably going to get there in a second. I'm rushing a bit. I'm rooting for Aaron Hicks to actually figure it out. I don't like seeing guys struggle. I don't like when this is not easy, by the way. It's not easy to be consistent, to be year after year, to be healthy. And I know I'm probably going to take flack from that, but it's not.
Yeah.
So I root for these guys. I don't look to knock them down. I look to pick them up.
That's a great way to look at it. I feel like when it comes, because you mentioned Donaldson, I feel like Hicks is a much easier guy to root for than Donaldson, because Donaldson is constantly starting trouble. The way he hit last year he had a bad offensive season.
That kind of magnified it. If he just performed the way he did when he was an MVP, and I know that's asking a lot.
It's a little, especially at that age.
Yeah. But I mean, you have to be realistic when it comes to what he's going to do this season based on what happened last season. Now, Aaron Boone, he's forever the optimist and he sees a bounce back year. And okay, he's down there. I'm not. If I could compare it to something, I just tweeted this out this morning. Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. I'm a Giant fan. He got $40 million a year, 4 years. Okay. All I see on all these shows with all these talking heads is the Giants made a huge mistake.
They didn't.
Here's my perspective on that. Okay. If we could talk football for 1 second.
Let's go. I'm a huge Giants fan.
Just 1 second. We've seen every iteration of leadership within this organization since the end of the Tom Coughlin era. If Daboll and Shane think Daniel Jones is the guy, I'm riding with them because there's finally adults in charge of this organization. And if all these talking heads want to say it's a mistake, y'all can listen to the talking heads. I'm not. I'm going within myself. I trust Shane and Daboll. I trust their process. I'm not listening to anybody else. And just because the guy had 15 touchdown passes last year, I'm not measuring him on that. Now, look, I don't think he's the second coming of Peyton Manning, but does he have to be?
No.
If you're building something, and you as Giant fans, we saw last year, we saw inside that locker room after big wins. We saw what that room is like. We saw the culture built, which was terrible before that. These two know what they're doing. And if they're rolling with Danny Dimes, Giant fans should fall right in line and roll with everybody and roll with them. That's my take on it. There's my hot take. It's not a popular one where I get to, laugh into the camera and just guffaw at the notion of Daniel Jones getting paid just to get people to watch it and talk about it. No, I trust the brain trust with the Giants.
I've always said it with Jones. Get him a number one receiver, which he's never had. His best receiver over the 4 years is still, to this day, which blows my mind, Darius Slayton. Because Shepard's good. He can't stay healthy. And I think the biggest thing with Jones is you saw what he did last year. Daboll
is Galladay even on the team?
He's getting cut March 15th. What a bad deal. Oh, God.
Oh, God.
But I watched every game that Daniel Jones started this year. And from every game I would watch, there would be that one drive where he would show you what he can do with legitimate talent around him. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have it. He still doesn't have it. They have a lot of holes to fill. But if you get him a couple of good receivers and you can shore up that offensive line, which I think Evan Neal's going to have a better year this year as a rookie. Look at Andrew Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Thomas had a terrible rookie
season. Your bookends.
You have your two tackles for the next 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Jones showed that he's a leader. The locker room loves him. I think Darius Slayton was defending him on Twitter today about how he's a quarterback. He won a playoff game. If you look at some of the quarterbacks that are making the same amount of money in his range, Kirk Cousins has the same amount of playoff wins as he does. He beat Kirk Cousins in the playoffs. He outdueled Kirk Cousins in the playoffs.
Think about that. He went into Minnesota and won a playoff game. Now, I know Minnesota's pass defense was one of the worst in the NFL. I get that.
So was the Giants.
But going into Minnesota, it's not an easy place to play and win. Throughout the history of being a Giant fan, watching them in that place against that team, any iteration of the Vikings, not easy. Went in there, first playoff experience, and won. And we know, Dan, that this is just the beginning. These guys just took over. Daboll and Shane just took over. This is their second draft coming up?
Yeah.
So I'm giving them, along with Daniel Jones, I'm giving them this draft and next draft. So the 2023 draft and 2024 draft. So going into the 24 season, I'm looking at the Giants being one of the top teams in the NFC.
I agree.
That's where my head is right now.
And I think people kind of mistaken this as like, oh, Jones didn't have the greatest stats. They didn't really let him start getting into that offense until December. And from December on, he was one of the top quarterbacks in the league. Like his first few months, he didn't really throw. They were a running offense.
Because Dayball had to see what he had in this guy.
Exactly.
He just left Josh Allen in Buffalo, you know, and we saw what he did with him. So I don't know.
I trust both of them a
like
lot.
I said, yes, like I said, these guys know what they're doing. I trust them. I'm not listening to the gas bags on all these shows.
Well, I also think there's not a lot of them that watch New York Giants football because if you look at Geno Smith did basically exactly what Daniel Jones did, just had better stats this year because Geno had a better offense around him and no one turned a blind eye when Geno Smith got 100 million for 3 years. Everyone was praising it.
Yeah, I don't know. I just hope. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Major League, but the
I
fictional
have.
manager Lou Brown in that movie.
It's a winning streak.
Well, he also talked about giving everyone a big blank burger to eat. Well, I hope Daniel Jones is serving those up for everybody who is out there giving their hot takes on Twitter today.
He's a good quarterback. I would put him right now ahead of Kirk Cousins if I had to rank blindly rank quarterback.
Why wouldn't you? He beat him head to head in playoff game.
Threw for 300 yards and rushed for almost 80.
Yeah, and he was extremely good in that game. Extremely good.
And I don't
They knew, Dan, that they could not make mistakes in that game. They couldn't. And against the Eagles, look, the Eagles were the class of the NFC. Let's be honest.
they demolished a team like San Francisco who was light years better than the Giants.
They were stacked top to bottom. It didn't help that San Francisco, lost how many quarterbacks this season?
4.
I mean, geez. Oh my God, McCaffrey's running the offense.
It's crazy, but
Yeah,
I'm excited.
I'm sorry, I deflected you from the Yankees.
No.
I want to get back to the Yankees. That's fine.
I love talking Giants. I'll talk Giants with anyone. I just had a couple more Yankee questions.
Yeah, go ahead, hit me.
But what do you think is Josh Donaldson's offensive output this year? Is it more of what we saw last year, or is it closer to the player that the Yankees traded for in 2021, which I think most fans and most people will now admit was a mistake of a trade?
I think the only thing you could hope for is that he's better than last year. I don't think there's a ceiling with a guy who's another year older who performed like he performed last year. It'll be remain. It's going to be. Look, he's still defensively, he's still a great third baseman. So you could take that and you could put it into the hopper and spit out whatever you want. But corner infield with the New York Yankees, you have to produce the plate. You can't take the year off. And if he starts to struggle, he's going to find himself on the bench, and DJ LeMahieu is going to be your third baseman. So to answer your question, you hope it's better than last year, but I don't know. It's like John Sterling says all the time, can't predict baseball, Susan, and you just can't. Mm-hmm. You just can't. Aaron Boone said he put the work in. Everybody comes in the best shape of their lives at spring training. But it's all about the translation from spring to when it counts for real.
So now you were mentioning before we hopped on the record that you've been in the locker room before.
Yeah.
Do you know how he was in the locker room last year? Was he a guy that was well liked?
I was not in the locker room last year.
Okay.
I haven't been in the locker room with Josh Donaldson with the whole COVID situation. I haven't been in there, God, for like 3 years. So I apologize. It's a great question. I just haven't been in there since he's been on the team.
Do you know anyone that has been in the locker room that can attest to whether he's a good locker room guy or not?
Not a conversation I have with anybody. All I could go on is what people in the past have said, and there has been some talk about him not being good in the clubhouse, but I mean, it's second, third, fourth hand information. I don't know.
Mhm.
He might be great. I just don't know. I would be speaking out of the other side of my body, if you get what I mean.
Fair enough. Well, I've always thought this way. Like, I know that I like you didn't need to realize like be I lost my train of thought, but
Okay.
with Judge especially, and with everything that happened with Donaldson and Tim Anderson, I knew Judge. Like Judge could try to cover it up as much as he could. Judge didn't like that.
No,
I don't think a lot of that those guys like that, and
no,
I think it
because
really
they're the
affected their
ones.
dynamic.
Yeah, those are the things you don't want to have to deal with throughout the season. Now, look, it's a long season, and you could take time to throw dirt on it, but it's still there. You know, you still have to go out there, and you're going to get asked the questions. Let's be honest, it's New York. It's not going to be forgotten in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. You're still going to get asked questions. Even in long form interviews, you probably get asked the question. So, yeah, in a perfect world, you definitely don't want somebody doing something like that. You don't. It just comes off as stupidity. It's just play, just play. Let your play do the talking, not your actual talking. Because if you look back to last year, people remember that, and he was awful at the plate. That's the two things people remember about his 2022 season. And that's something you don't want to put in a time capsule. You want to bury that, or actually you want to put it in a rocket and send it into the sun.
Yeah. I I just remember seeing that and I was very taken back by why someone would feel the need to say something like that. And I think that really messed up the dynamic. And I feel like he was doing fine at the plate. And after that happened, he wasn't good for the rest of the year.
He got hurt too. He had to deal with injury, and you know, baseball guys are regimented. They're all, especially pitchers. You can't take pitchers out of their flow.
Mhm.
It just messes them up completely. Um, but you just hope that the guy can start a streak at the beginning of the season, because if he gets off to a slow start, I mean, they're booing him and Hicks in Tampa. If they get off to a slow start in the Bronx, it's not going to be pretty, and that's not going to do anything for them mentally when they get up here.
Mhm.
So you hope at least for a couple weeks, March, April, they're doing, both of them are hitting the ball and it's starting to be positive, because then I think they could take that and duplicate it throughout the season.
And there's no worse feeling than getting booed in your home ballpark.
No, no. And as far as booing goes, Derek Jeter got booed. Don't tell me you can't boo anybody in New York. You could boo whoever the hell you want in New
Hmm.
York. It's New York.
Judge got booed.
Yeah, it happens. No, I don't understand why people get all upset about that. Fans pay money to sit in those seats. They pay money to see people produce. If they don't produce, now look, if somebody goes 0 for 5 on opening day and you start booing them,
A
maybe
little bit much.
you have some issues yourself. I'm not saying you don't have the right to boo. You can do whatever you want, but you know, 2 months in, 3 months in, guys aren't producing. Yeah, okay, fine, do it. But 0 for 5 on opening day, pump the brakes.
And my last question is actually two more. Who do you think's going to win the fifth starter spot?
Well, right now it's looking like, based on numbers and numbers alone, it's Herman. And I'll tell you what I think. And I know the Yankees don't care what I think, especially the coaching staff. But I'll give you my gas bag daily show opinion. I think Herman should be the number 5 starter. I like Schmidt, even though he's developed a cutter now. He's got 3 pitches in his arsenal, which I think is great, and it makes him a more effective starter. And we saw in his first start, that cutter was pretty much lights
Filthy.
out. Yeah. So in a perfect world for me, I think Herman, I think, fits better, because I think that's where he's more comfortable.
Hmm.
I think he's more comfortable as a starter.
And he's
And
a good starter.
you're talking about a guy who had an 18 win season, or 19, 18 or 19. I can't remember off the top of my head.
19.
I apologize. 19. um, in a 19-win season. And Schmidt, to me, coming out of the bullpen, especially if Canely, and this might have something to do with it too, if Canely can't go for a month, you have another, like, you could, it's going to take a while to build him up if you need him later in the season to be a spot starter. They could do that. And they could do that while he's up here. They could send him back down. I just think Schmidt is a better option out of the bullpen, and Herman is a better option in a starting rotation. But that's just me.
I think I agree with that. I think because if you look at it, that's what their roles were last year. And I know Schmidt struggled in the playoffs as a reliever, but you're also asking him to get high leverage outs in some of the toughest environments. He'd never closed before.
That was his first time doing it, and he's got that under his belt now. That's always big. I know he didn't really excel, but now he has the experience. And people could poo-poo that. Well, he didn't do it. Fine. But now he knows what it's like. Now he knows what it's like to be on the big stage with that uniform on and pitching in the playoffs. And I think he could take that and exponentially get better this season and rectify last year when he gets out there this year.
Well, I think people have to realize, and I know baseball fans and sports fans in general aren't like this, but sports is really the same thing as real life. You need to fail to succeed.
Of course.
And if that means failing on the biggest stage, you're just going to come back stronger. And Schmidt seems like the guy that he really worked. He developed a cutter that looks absolutely filthy.
Mm-hmm.
So you're right. I think that he's going to have a very good year out of their bullpen if that's where they put him, or if he's a starter, he'll be good there too.
And what does that cutter do? It makes him more effective against lefties. And he wasn't as effective against lefties last season. That bores in on lefties' hands. Righties have to determine whether this is this a fastball? It's inside. What is? Oh, it's too late. So if he could really perfect that, I can't remember. Dan, remind me. Who is the Yankee reliever who just threw one pitch? He had over
Mariano Rivera
saves. Yeah. So look, I'm not saying Schmidt is Mariano Rivera. Okay, let's just throw that out there right now.
Yeah.
However, he could, if he keeps developing that over the season and keeps working on it, and he's got people in the Yankees organization who could help him with it. I just think in my gut, he's a better option out of the bullpen.
I couldn't agree more. And he seems like the guy that you could see how his attitude and how he goes on the mound. He could be a closer. He's got that mentality that
He's a bulldog.
You need a closer to have.
He's the type of guy, I've talked to him a couple times. He's the type of guy that the organization is holding the ball out and they're saying his role is X, Y, or Z. And Schmidt will take the ball and say, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you need guys like that in your organization. You need guys who will do anything they have to do to help the team win. And Schmidt's one of those guys.
And my last question is, what would you say is your outlook on the Yankee season in 2023?
It's funny. This is a little bit corny, a little bit kitschy, but the Red Sox last won the World Series in 2018. Okay. When I was growing up, the big chant was 1918. Last time they won was 2018. When the Yankees won their first World Series championship?
I knew you were going here. 1923.
So I really do. This is not, he works for, yes, he's this, he's that. No. And I know you could say this about any team in any year. If this team, with the improvements they made to the rotation with Rodon, and throw out his first spring training start, the guy put a Yankee uniform on and he was amped up beyond all recognition. That could have happened to me, you, anybody. He was overamped. He couldn't get a guy out in the second inning of work, whatever. It is what it is. Cole, who's looked great. Rodon, a healthy Severino, a healthy Nestor Cortez, who might end up being the fifth starter because he's a little behind. So they might bump up Herman and Schmidt to 4 and then have Cortez 5 to start the season. That is arguably the best rotation in Major League Baseball. It
Hmm.
is. It is. And I say it time and time again to anybody who wants to listen to me. You want to win, you want to go deep in the playoffs, you need strong starting pitching, and you need at least a top 2.5. And the Yankees, if Severino stays healthy, they have a top 3. They do. And the
4.
bull they with Cortez. I don't mean to leave Nestor out. And I don't think that was just a one and done, like that was just his
He's
one all
good.
year. He works too hard at his craft for that to be the case. Plus, let's not forget, Nestor was
An
pretty
all-star
much,
last year.
he was an all-star, but for a time, for about a month and a half, he was the best starter on the Yankees. That's a guy with Garrett Cole at the top of the rotation, and Nestor Cortez was the best pitcher on the team. On the team.
Yeah.
You put those 4 in line. Look, you're going to have your hiccups it's 162 games. If you're healthy, you're going to make 32, 33, 34 starts. It all comes down to health. If they could stay healthy, Giancarlo Stanton played 158 games his first year as a Yankee and had ridiculous numbers. Aaron Hicks, when he's healthy, he performs from both sides of the plate. He catches up to that higher fastball. He's holding his hands up higher now, and he's catching up to it down in spring. Does he do it in the Bronx? Who knows? But if this lineup stays healthy, if the pitching stays healthy, the Yankees are going to be the last team standing. Not in the World Series. They're going to win the World Series this season.
I couldn't agree more. And the other thing is, this is an incomplete team. There
Yeah,
are still holes that they might
yeah, of
need to fill.
course.
And Brian Cashman has shown that he is willing to go trade for people at the deadline, albeit not. There's been some bad trades over the years, but that happens. The Montage trade has not looked very good, and he's someone that might come back and could be a big option out of that rotation or bullpen. So he's another guy that you could add to that 5 that would make it dynamic.
Of course, he'll be like a trade deadline acquisition. He can't start throwing for 9 to 10 weeks. We just saw that yesterday.
Yeah.
But when he does come back, he's another option. And who knows what you have in Herman and Schmidt at that point, and then if you take Domingo Herman out of the rotation, he becomes your long guy out of the bullpen. Everything just seems like if they stay healthy, it just, there's something funky. The 2023, the 100 years after their first World Series championship, they made the great additions to the rotation. I just think there's something about this season, and there's something about Judge being back and how he wanted to be a Yankee for life, and Rizzo came back. These guys, to me, not that they're not hungry every season, Dan, but I think the hunger after last year, after getting swept by the Astros, after the way, I think that taste is still in their mouth. And Rizzo and Judge leading this team along with Stanton, everybody else is going to follow suit, and these guys are going to run through a brick wall. And I think the trophy goes back to the Bronx.
I hope you're right. I've been waiting. I've spent the last 14 years getting more and more infuriated.
Hey, you're talking to a kid who was born in 1973, barely remembers 77 and 78, sort of remembers 81 when they got beat by the Dodgers. And then from 82 to 95, Mattingly's years with the Yankees, one playoff appearance, and we're up 2-0 on the Mariners, and then we lose 3 straight. So you're talking about a drought from 78 to 96. So I'll take 14 years anytime.
Well, it's funny that you say that. The first year I really started following the Yankees was 2010. The only thing I remember about their World Series win in 2009 was the Jay-Z and Alicia Keys concert before Game 2.
Wow. Yeah, we're generations apart. So 2009, is kind of like my 1978 for you. You
Yes.
kind of barely remember it, but you remember it. So you need that one where you could really remember it, revel in it, be with your friends when the final out is caught.
Mhm.
I remember, I'll tell you a quick story. 1996, I worked for MSNBC. We just launched and we had our launch party, and it was mandatory that we went. It was at the Liberty Science Center off of exit 14 on the turnpike. Showed my face. I was there for an hour, and I gotta go be with my friends. I can't miss this game. Game 6, of course, against the Braves. I get in the car, and I hope there's no police officers watching this. I don't think they could retrofit me with a speeding ticket, but I was doing like 100 miles an hour down the Jersey Turnpike to get very irresponsible of me. I get it, but I needed to be with my friends because this is a moment we waited for 18 years. I mean, we needed that one like you where we were all there, we all drank it in and we all went nuts. And I got to the red light before the bar I was going to when Mo struck out somebody in the top of the 8th. I walked into the bar in the bottom of the 8th, and then we all saw Hayes squeeze that foul, the
Mhm.
fly ball with the final out. And we just I remember jumping into my friend Brian's arms, and he just grabbed me and picked me, bear hugged me. It was one of the best moments of all. It was like we were there, like we were playing and we won. It's all that struggling in the 80s and all the different types of Yankee teams we had and all the crappy pitching they had. They did have the most wins in the 80s, though. It's kind of weird. They were the most, I think they're the winningest franchise in the 80s, but they didn't have a playoff win. Um, but to get through all that and in the early 90s with Stump Merrill winning 69 games, I mean, we were the butt of jokes. The Mets won in 86. That made our lives a living hell in school.
Mhm.
But to have that win was amazing. And I hope for your sake that happens this year.
I'm hoping the same thing because last year was embarrassing. It was. I remember being so angry just because they almost lost to Cleveland. Like they were a bad Garrett Cole start away from losing that series too.
Hey, never underestimate a Terry Francona managed team. You can't take
Yeah.
any team managed by that guy lightly. So,
But thank you so much for doing this, Chris. It was so much fun. Let's
and
go
anytime.
Yankees.
My my pleasure. Thanks, buddy.